Well, we're in week 2 of this message series called Love Matters, about how God wants to transform our relationships, because relationships matter. We talked about last week the importance of our relationships, that one of the reasons why people are struggling spiritually in our day is because they're struggling relationally, which is why Jesus called the church to be a place, we talked about this last week, to be a place where kind of fundamentally, job number 1, we're called to love and be loved. This is how Jesus described it to his disciples. This verse we read last week, a new command I give you, love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. In other words, the world will know who we follow by how we love. And so for these 5 weeks, we're really kind of going back to school on love. Love's a funny word. It gets used in lots of different ways in our world and has kind of a fuzzy kind of tone at times. So we're getting really clear about the ways that Jesus loved and trying to put those into practice, trying to become the kind of people from whom his love simply flows from us. And just as a reminder, this is not meant to be a series of lectures or sermons. It's meant to be the start of a bunch of conversations, which is why we're inviting all of you who are in small groups to be really kind of talking about relational life in your small groups over these weeks. And if you're not in a small group, good news, we have a lot of small groups that you can join just for this series. I think every night of the week, there's a small group that's happening around Love Matters. I have some I can put up on the screen so that you can see just how many options there are. These are all online or on the North Shore app, so you don't have to write these down. But if you're not connected, this is a great opportunity just for a few weeks to get more connected to what's going on here. Whether you're single or married or formerly married, this conversation is for you. And to kind of guide us through the conversation, we've been using this book that we gave away on Christmas Eve called The 5 Love Languages by a psychologist named Dr. Gary Chapman. And he describes 5 different ways that people give and receive love. And last week, we looked at this love language, words of affirmation. And remember the ratio of positive to negative interactions that's a sign of a healthy marriage? Remember the number? 5 to 1. It's going okay this week? Kind of working it out, giving it a try. Someone emailed me this week and said, I really appreciate your messages. I even send my friends the good ones. And I thought to myself, the good ones, the bad ones. So, we're working at it. We're trying to get our way there. We're getting warmer. And this week, we're turning to a second and extremely important love language that Chapman calls quality time. Quality time, which, by the way, isn't just about spending a certain number of minutes with someone. Quality time is really about your presence with someone else. Quality time is about listening. It's about eye contact. It's about the quality of interaction or conversation you have. He actually describes quality time. He summarized it by saying it's really a sense of undivided attention. Undivided attention. He writes, I don't mean sitting on the couch and watching TV together. What I mean is sitting on the couch with the TV off, looking at each other, talking, giving each other your undivided attention. It means taking a walk, just the two of you, or with a friend, or going out to eat and just looking at each other and talking. Of course, if you go into a restaurant today and you see people gathered around a table having a meal, what are they typically looking at? They're looking at one of these, aren't they? I actually was just at a restaurant not long ago, and there was a family of 6 around a table. Every person from adult to a 2-year-old child staring at a screen. And they had the devices and the Bluetooth headsets and the satellite hookup. It was just all kind of tethered together. They were wired. And I got thinking more and more about this. Someone emailed me this week saying, if we're going to talk about relationships, we've got to talk about technology. And I could not agree more. Because the main competitor for your attention today is a screen. Do you know that the average child today will spend more time consuming electronic media than they do in school? More time consuming electronic media. And then study after study is showing us that this excessive screen time is impacting attention span and cognitive development and interpersonal skills. And it's not just with kids. A British study found that 6 out of 10 parents are worried that their kids are spending too much time on the screen. So 6 out of 10 parents, but 7 out of 10 kids think their parents are spending too much time on their screen. So the kids are more worried about it than the adults are. And as part of this series, I've been kind of thinking about and actually counting during the week how many times it is that I will kind of pick this up and just take a look at the device in my hand, the screen. And it's kind of alarming. I'll find myself looking at my phone 30, 40, 50, 60 times during the day. What if I have a new email? I wonder if someone posted something cool on Instagram. Is there a tweet that's worth tweeting or retweeting or detweeting or whatever it is that you do with it? Sometimes I reach for my phone right after I'd already looked at it, even though I know there's nothing new to look at. Sometimes I'll reach for my phone when I'm actually in a conversation with another person. Anyone, have you ever done that? Anybody else done that? Some of you are doing it right now. I can see you're just kind of like, it's not me. There's a researcher at MIT named Sherry Turkle who's written this very interesting book called Alone Together on the impact of technology-mediated communication in our day, particularly on the generations of younger people who are growing up learning to communicate this way. And she's noticed a number of trends when it comes to this online connection. One of those is what she calls presentation anxiety. That people are living with more and more of a sense of presentation anxiety, basically worrying more about how they are presenting themselves online than the kind of person they actually are. We don't just want to communicate with our friends, we want to get more likes or more friend requests or more attention. That is through the pictures we post or the messages we send or the music we like. Communicating online is evolving into this sort of performance where, again, it's as much about how people think I'm doing as it is how I'm actually doing. One person she interviewed said, "I wish I was more like I am online." Now think about that. Not like a mentor or a person that I aspire to be more like. I wish I was like the person that I'm actually presenting to people online. Another trend she notices was around texting. Texting is wonderfully efficient, but it can create what researchers have called kind of this reassuring distance between people. An in-person conversation, there's body language and facial expressions and emotions can run high and it can be kind of messy, but in texting you have all this seemingly control over the interaction and so much less interaction. When people text, they can actually plan out what they want to say. They can craft their message. I just read this week, some people will spend 10 to 20 minutes planning out one text. And it's making in-person interactions more and more difficult. One of the young people that this researcher interviewed said that she refuses to use the phone because you have to know how to end the conversation. And she said she didn't know how to do that. She did not know how to end the conversation. Research has found that excessive time on screen, as much as we feel like we're connected more, can actually produce this growing sense of isolation in our lives. Young people who spend more than 2 hours a day on social media are more likely to experience or express or report psychological distress in their life. Article called it a compare and despair mindset, where we're constantly comparing what we see out there, the external of other people's lives, to what's actually going on in our own lives. Which, by the way, isn't always so pretty, is it? And the answer, by the way, is not, and this is not a message to bag on technology or bag on cell phones or to bag on all the really amazing things that those tools can provide, but the answer is not more Facebook friends or more likes on Instagram. The answer is one of the most fundamental needs that God has literally hardwired into your body, your mind, and your soul, and it's the need to spend time with another person. It is your need for someone else's undivided attention. Ever been with someone who's just blessed you with their undivided eye contact, fully present, nothing else in the world seems to matter attention? It is a great gift. And Jesus was the master of loving people this way. There's a story about Jesus meeting a tax collector named Zacchaeus. And Zacchaeus had gone out to see Jesus, but when Jesus saw him, he said, he didn't just want to have a passing conversation. He said, "Zach, I'm coming to your house. I'm spending time with you." And they didn't just have a brief interaction. They had quality time together, and it changed Zacchaeus' life forever. Some of you know the story of Jesus when he was traveling through Samaria, and he had this interaction with this particular Samaritan woman who had this very scandalous past, a person who other people would have avoided. And in their conversation, they had this amazing interaction. In fact, it's the longest recorded conversation in the Gospels with this woman. A person the disciples would have said, "Gosh, why are you even having the conversation at all?" And that conversation changed her life forever. Just Jesus' undivided attention. On another occasion, there was a religious leader named Nicodemus who had some questions for Jesus, but he didn't want to be seen with these questions, so he went and found Jesus at night. Past office hours, not during teaching time. He found him at night, and Jesus gave him the gift of his time and attention. They had this amazing conversation about what it means to be born again and the theological implications of that, and it changed Nicodemus's life forever. One scholar I read pointed out that when Jesus actually called the 12 disciples in the Gospel of Mark, the text says, he appointed 12 that they might be with him. You see, he doesn't just call us to a life of doing or preaching or working or so. The point of being a disciple, the primary point, is just to be with Jesus, to experience God's undivided attention on our lives. Because love, you see, takes time. Love takes time, and not just the passing of time minute after minute, but the giving of time, the actual giving over of your time. And by the way, this is where it starts to get a little bit personal, because guess what? Time in our day is the most precious commodity, is it not? Even more so, we can give away some resources or give away some advice or give away some knowledge, or we can give away some wisdom, but time. So few people today would say that they have an abundance of time. They'll tell you this, I'm really busy. I've got a lot going on. My schedule's pretty full. Time is our most precious commodity. Time is what we guard. Time is what we have so little of. With all the pressures of work and being successful and impressing others, everything competing for your time, not to mention those screens that are pulling you in day after day after day. So what do we do? What do we do? We have to set out to learn how to love with our time. We have to be intentional and make a decision. God, I want to set out to become the kind of person who can love with my time. And so for this message, I just want to give you a few ways that you can put this into practice, a few disciplines that can help you put this into practice in your own life. First way you can do this is simply this: prioritize your relationships. Prioritize your relationships. And by the way, this is incredibly countercultural in our day. People will put priorities on wealth, on income, on success, on reputation, but relationships, they always seem to drift into the sidelines. It's always where we tend to make compromises. But Jesus was incredibly intentional about his time with his friends. One example, after he had turned water into wine at a wedding in Cana, the Gospel of John tells us this: after this, he went down to the city of Capernaum with his mother and brothers and his disciples. There they stayed for a few days. Isn't that a cool detail? John's reminding us, hey, just by the way, they just paused and took a break and they just had time together. And we don't know what happened. I'm so curious. What did they talk about? And what jokes were told? And how did they spend time together? And what stories did they share? We don't get to see. Those were the personal, private, intimate moments between Jesus and his undivided attention for those whom he loved. See, Jesus didn't just love people by doing things for them. Jesus loved people by spending time with them. This past week, I was able to get away out of town for a couple of days with a few other pastors here at North Shore. And it was amazing just in that extended block of time, just a couple of days together. We accomplished, there was plenty to do and work to talk about, but just that relational connection time, it was like a year's worth of 1-hour meetings were accomplished just by having a little extra time to savor. The friendship and the laughter and just all that extra time that it provides. You see, when you're in a relationship, a friendship, a marriage, whatever it is, you need time. You need time. You can't microwave it. You can't rush it. You can't accomplish it just through an instant message or a Facebook message or so. You need time. And by the way, this is why our church is built around this idea of small groups, of people gathering together in person with one another to share community with one another. Because the alternative is we gather together each week and we're around people, but we go through life alone. And some of you are even doing that, even now. I met someone at church a while back who told me for years they got to church late and they left early and they always sat in the back row so they didn't have to interact with anybody. And I had to tell her this church is far more than just the message. It's about people. It's about getting connected to people. So for all of you in the back row, you can just kind of turn around and wave at them back there. They're back there. We see you. It's okay. Some of you are thinking, I am never coming back to this place ever again. I'm back here for a reason. Make time for your relationships, for your spouse, for your kids, for your friends, to meet new people. No amount of success or status can make up for lost time with people. Some years ago, I was serving as a hospital chaplain, and I will never forget a patient that we'll call Peter. And Peter was dying of cancer. He was in the palliative care unit where it was no longer trying to treat the cancer, it was just managing his pain. And I spent several weeks visiting Peter almost every day. And what was amazing was Peter had this amazingly accomplished life in terms of his wealth, his income, what he'd accomplished, his success. He had a very intimidating resume. He was the kind of guy whose name, I'm sure, would appear someday on a building somewhere. But when I talked to Peter, what he expressed most, and one of the most surprising things that we talked about were his regrets. You know what his regrets had to deal with? Time. Time with people. Time with family, with people he loved. Making more times for friends. He regretted the one thing that his money couldn't buy, that his reputation couldn't provide, that his legacy didn't include, and it was people around him. In fact, I was the only person who was visiting him in the hospital for those 2 weeks. And I thought to myself, he had lived the life that he thought was the kind of American dream, what we all aspire for, and he had missed it. We have to prioritize our relationship. So this week, a little bit of homework. Cancel something at work, something else, and spend extra time with a close friend or your spouse. Actually cancel something to schedule something else. Make time this week to be with your kids. Block out time right when you're home from work or this weekend. Or plan a conversation with a friend that's been long overdue. And here's the thing. Do it again next week. And then next week. And then the next week. And then it becomes a habit, you see. And then you begin to experience a kind and a quality of life that you never thought was possible because you chose the discipline of prioritizing relationship. That's the first way we can love with our time. Another way you can love with your time is to give the gift of your attention. The gift of your attention. Quick kind of, just audience survey. How many of you would consider yourself a multitasker? How many of you think of yourself, you're kind of a multitasker? Some of you are thinking, yep, I say that. Some of you, you know a multitasker, you live with a multitasker. Did you know at a neurological level, there is no such thing as multitasking? Did you know this? Brain science can show this. The brain actually cannot do two things at once. In fact, people who self-identify as the best multitaskers, statistically speaking, are usually the worst multitaskers. You feeling bad? You raise your hand now? Some of you weren't listening. You were raising your hand, so you can't do both at once, right? Your brain is designed to do one thing at a time. So when you're checking your email and trying to have a conversation, it's not really working out. Or when you're, looking through your Instagram feed but trying to listen to your spouse, you're actually not doing both. You're really not doing either of them well. Which means we have to make an intentional choice about to whom or to what we will give our attention. Your attention is a precious thing. It's a precious thing. There's a moment in the Gospel of Luke where a group of little children are brought to Jesus. And by the way, in the first century, children were not considered kind of the cute, amazing, little ones they are today. I have a 9-month-old, so I will meet a stranger and instantly be like, let me show you a picture of my baby, my baby, my baby. It's all just about the cute factory that's going on with the babies. But in Jesus' day, it was almost the opposite. Children were seen as having really no intrinsic value while they were still children. So when the families brought the children to Jesus, Luke reminds us the disciples rebuked those families. Why are you bothering Jesus with these insignificant little ones? And then Jesus rebukes his disciples and says this amazing thing, let the children come to me. He had attention he wanted to give to those on the margins, to those who'd been left out, to those of lower status. Jesus gave the gift of his attention. Another example, when Jesus is spending some time with his close friends, and there's a woman named Martha who begins to complain about her sister Mary because Mary's not helping Martha with all the tasks and the meal preparation and getting the house ready. Mary is just sitting there attending to Jesus. And Jesus replies in this amazing way, Martha, Martha, you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, indeed only one. You see, there's no multitasking. There's just one thing at a time. And Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her. Mary understood, gosh, I only have so many moments and so much attention. I want to give it to the right things. To the right things. Few things communicate love like undivided attention, Which is why one of the most painful moments in a relationship is when a loved one is too preoccupied to pay attention. A study at the Boston Medical Center followed parent-child interactions at fast food restaurants in our day, and they found that 70% of the adults will be on their phone at some time during the meal. And 32% of those children will say that they feel less important because of those conversations. 1 out of 3 kids is being told, "You don't matter as much to me." And there's a simple way that we can change this, a really simple thing. It's a question you can ask the people in your life this week. The question is this: are you getting enough of my time? Are you getting enough of my time? And what's scary about that question is they might say, "No, I'm not." And you got a full schedule and a crowded week, and you're kind of already maxed out, and the pressure's never been higher at work, but there's always a way to give attention to those you love. And by the way, there's always too many demands to meet all of them, and you're going to disappoint someone. So who are you going to disappoint? And so we have to learn to do this, to guard one night a week for a date night, to block time for your kids after work, to schedule phone calls with friends or family, to get out of town every few months with people that matter to you. Or even, especially when it comes to one of these things, to spend some time maybe taking a technology fast, a screen fast, and block out an evening or a weekend or a day a month where you simply avoid the screen and give your attention to the people in your life that matter to you. And here's the best part. That doesn't cost you any money. You don't have to be like super talented at anything. You just give someone yourself. Give them your attention. It's a second way. A third way to show love with your time is to enjoy shared experience. It's a pretty simple one. The Gospels are filled with Jesus and his disciples enjoying shared time together. It's actually woven all throughout the stories. Jesus would share meals with his friends. He would take walks with his disciples. They climbed mountains together. They went fishing together. They shared the Passover meal, this Passover celebration together. Almost every story or sermon or miracle is really done in the context of Jesus and his disciples doing something together. All the way to the end of his life, when Jesus calls them together to go pray with him in the Garden of Gethsemane, when Jesus could have done that kind of on his own. He could have said, "I'll do it by myself. You're just going to fall asleep anyway." But Jesus does that shared experience together. And we need this too. And again, you don't have to be super talented. You don't have to have a PhD in fun activities. You just need to take the initiative. Hey, do you want to take a walk this week? Hey, can we get together for coffee? Hey, can we finally schedule that conversation? Hey, do you want to read this book together and talk about it sometime? And here's the thing, even when it's someone you know well, it can be a little vulnerable to ask, can't it, right? Because shared time is intimate time. It's part of how God designed us to be able to grow closer together and to share love. Which leads to one last way we can show love with our time, and it's this: be willing to be vulnerable. Be willing to be vulnerable. Now, this is an interesting one, isn't it? You're like, what does that have to do with time? What's interesting is, in a way, the internet allows us to share more than we ever have before. You can scroll through, again, a Facebook feed or an Instagram feed and find out, who had a vacation or who has a birthday or who just had a child. But one of the dangers of our kind of digital connected lives is that instead of in-person connections, it's easier to actually hide the parts of our lives that you don't like, isn't it? I just read that when people actually get a like on their picture or their feed, when they get like a little bit of a response, a positive like, it actually kind of triggers the same brain chemistry that happens when you eat chocolate. In other words, you like that response. You want that response. You want more of that response, which is why more and more people are presenting themselves and presenting their lives in a way that says, here's my best look, here's my best day, here's our filtered family, so and so. But then here's the question, what about all that stuff that's messy? What about the anxiety that you're wrestling with? What about the eating disorder that's just been haunting you? What about the addiction that you can't shake? What about the depression that seems to be lurking always at the door? See, sure, people are posting more, but really we're sharing less. So who's seeing the real you? Who has time for the real you? Who knows the real stories? And if you don't think it's okay to be vulnerable in a church context, just look at the Apostle Paul, one of the greatest leaders in church history, one of my heroes, who shared more about his weaknesses than his strengths. He would say things like, "For I have the desire to do what is good, but I cannot carry it out. For I do not do the good I want to do, but the evil I do not I do not want to do, I keep on doing. In other words, I'm messing up all the time and I know it. But at least he had the courage to share it. At least he could say it. You'll hear me say this a lot over the years. There's really only two kinds of communities. There's the kind where people look better but get worse, and the kind where people look worse but they get better. And that's the same. And the same is true in our relationships. The point is not to keep up a facade of happy and healthy. The point is to be vulnerable, to open up and give the space to love and be loved. And love takes vulnerability. Love takes opening up. Love means letting down your guard and letting people in. Love is being willing to admit even when you've really messed up. Some time ago, Nina and I were having a check-in, which in marriage language usually means there's something I've done that we needed to check in about. And so we were having a conversation, and she pointed out that I had forgot something that I had said I would remember to do. But instead of saying, yes, I completely forgot, and I'm so sorry, and that must feel just terrible to have done that, I kind of left out that detail, and I gave this kind of partially true answer about schedules being off or not having it on my calendar, because something inside me just said, don't admit. Don't admit. Don't admit. Quick show of hands, just a kind of moment of confession. Anyone else ever do this to somebody? Not tell the whole truth? Some of you raising your hand. Some of you are doing it right now. You're doing it right now by not raising your hand. The writer James in the New Testament writes this. Many of you know these words. Therefore, confess your sins to each other and pray for each other so that you may be healed. Part of the time we need to give each other is the time to be vulnerable and to confess and to admit and to forgive. And by the way, you cannot rush these conversations. You cannot hurry through confession and forgiveness. If there's someone in your life who's struggling with an addiction or a secret habit, or they're struggling at school, or they're failing at work, or they're dealing with anxiety or insecurity, they don't just need quick fix or advice. They need your undivided attention. And when someone takes the risk to confess, James doesn't say just rush to the next thing or give them a high five. He says stop and pray and be with them and spend time with God. Take time on this because love takes time. And here's the thing. You only have so much time. You only have so many moments to give. Psalmist once wrote these amazing words in Psalm 90. Lord, you have been our dwelling place throughout all generations. Our days may come to 70 years or 80 if our strength endures, for they quickly pass and we fly away. So then, teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom. You want to be wise with your life. You only have so many days. And they move fast, don't they? This past Christmas, my 95-year-old grandmother got to meet her 9-month-old great-granddaughter, our daughter Nora, for the first time. And seeing the two of them together made me realize how quickly life can go, how fast the days go, and how, God willing, Nora will one day reach a wonderful age of 95 years old. It'll be in the year 2112, when everyone here in this room is gone, and I'll be 140 years old. Everyone else will be kind of gone, and you only have so many days. You only have so many moments. Our time on this earth is fleeting, and yet we spend our moments on money, on success, on reputation. We hurry and worry and prioritize stuff that you cannot take with you, and we miss the real invitation God has for us to love and be loved, to experience the joy of relationship, and to surrender to the God of the universe who stepped out of heaven and into time, gave us his undivided attention, gave us his life and his death and his new life for us so that we could receive what? The gift of eternal life, which is really just a way of saying really, really, really quality time with God forever. That's the invitation before us. So if you'd pray with me. Jesus, you have given us the amazing gift of your time and your attention and your love and your grace. And how quickly I will move through life worried about a great many things. But as you once reminded Martha, only one thing really matters, and it's you. and it's your love. And it's the way your love can transform how we love. And so I pray, Jesus, that we would experience just the gift of your attention, your undivided attention right now in our lives. Some of you may feel far from God. Let me tell you this, God is not far from you. His attention is ever so close to you. There's no screen to distract him. There's no other place he'd rather be. And for those of you who have been walking with Jesus, maybe for a long time, maybe it's time to start thinking about how you give out your time in a new way. To shape your moments more like Jesus shaped his, focusing on people and giving undivided attention and sharing life experience and being willing to be vulnerable and create the time and space for people to see the real you and for you to find love in that. God, this week, open up our eyes to the gift of the time that you've given us, the moments you've given us, and may we use them and steward them in a way that gives glory and honor to you. And we praise this in your name. And everybody said, amen.